And I'll do a short welcome for Atmore students. I'm Dr. David Willis. I'm your instructor. I'll see you guys next week. This is a video going over the main points of the syllabus. You will need to review it for the quiz that's due before we meet again on the 14th. And just in general, because you're going to be asked to turn in a syllabus agreement. And the assignment for that's already posted on Canvas. Now, I'm not going to read everything in here. That would be pretty dull. But there are a lot of things I do have to go over. This is a contract, in essence, so it's important. When you guys get to the age, or some of you may have already bought a house, closing on a house is like, well, it's like torture, because it's like 2 hours of doing nothing but signing documents. And so this isn't going to be that. This is going to be a less painful than that, but it is important and something we need to do. Okay, so taking a look at the first page of the syllabus, I'll try to call out the page numbers as we're turning the pages. My contact information is up there at the top. My office is in the Bruton campus now for Atmore. I will try to get there at least a half an hour before class starts. That if you have any questions, you can ask me, and of course you can stay after in Atmore if you have questions. My email address is there, but you can contact me primarily through Canvas in the inbox there. My course schedule is posted on this. I don't quite know my office hours yet because I haven't figured them out. I was waiting on an email that just came in about 25 minutes ago. So I haven't had a chance to do my office hours yet. I will send a document to all of you guys when I have my office hours done. I am a supervisor, so if you do need to talk to my supervisor, Mary Beth Lancaster is the Dean of Students. She has an office in Atmore as well. Not Dean of Students, excuse me, Dean of Instruction. And she's a very nice person to talk to, so if you do need to talk to my supervisor for some reason, her contact information is there. Now, let me talk about the schedule for this class. This class meets every Tuesday, 6 to 8:40. If you are an Atmore student, you're welcome to come to the Bruton class. And Bruton students, as I mentioned before we started the video, are welcome to come to the Atmore class if you want. Right now, we'll be flipping every other week, unless I tell you differently. So today's the 9th of January, 16th, I'll be in Atmore, and so on throughout the term. But if you have an off night, just like tonight, you will have an assignment online. Now, there are some days where we're going to be rough drafting in class. For those of you, if you have a laptop, go ahead and bring it. If not, we can go over to the Learning Center and use the computers there. In Atmore, we have computer labs available to us, so we can do that. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to be doing in the class. Basically, we're taking the next step in our writing from English 101. 101 focuses primarily on learning to compose a good essay. Structure, transitions, things of that nature, some basics of research. Whereas in English 102, we step up and become more analytical in our writing, where we're writing about other things rather than mostly about ourselves. So every paper in this class, except for the one-act play essay, is going to be a research paper, even the final. Which are skills, if you're going to get a 4-year degree, are really going to be important in terms of your academic career. Okay, so we're going to move on to page 2. We're going to have 5 essays plus the essay portion of the final. There's going to be 2 drama essays, 2 fiction essays, and 1 poetry essay. Although it's frustrating to me, students tend to struggle with poetry the most, so I'm not going to make you write 2 papers on poetry. I'm realistic enough to know that you'll do better if you're writing on stuff that's interesting you more. Our first essay is going to be on a piece of very short fiction, 1,500 words or less. We'll have longer stories for the second fiction essay, We'll have a one-act play essay, which will be, in essence, an in-class essay, a drama essay, and then the final, which will actually incorporate all three. And we build as the class goes along. We start with fiction, move to poetry, we finish drama with Shakespeare, which combines all the components. It's a play, it's written in poetry, and it incorporates elements of plot just like a piece of fiction would. All right, so any questions so far? All righty. Moving down page 2. I'll let you read the outcomes on your own because I've kind of summarized them. To the required textbook, which looks like this at screen. If you are having trouble getting the textbook, I have posted the reading that you need for this week on Canvas as a PDF file. But you do need to work on getting your textbook right away because we're going to have reading for next week. I'll put it up on the board here in a second. And you know, we're focusing on literature, so unless you have the literature with you, it's really hard to participate in class. A couple other things for in-class sessions: you please have a notebook or a binder for taking notes and keeping class handouts. If I happen to do a handout on a week where we're in the off-campus location, for example, tonight, if you are in Atmore, please print out the first essay assignment, the literary terms, and the syllabus if you would. But you want to have a place to keep all that stuff. Blue or black pens. Most of the quizzes will actually be online for you guys for in-class sessions if you have a laptop. How many of you have a laptop? Everybody's sweet. Bring them to class. Because that'll make it easier to run this as a hybrid because you can take your quizzes online. Also, the quizzes will be more multiple choice, which students tend to like better. You do need access to a webcam because some of the rough drafts will require that you're being recorded. Also, make sure that you're checking your Canvas email and your Coastal email at least every other day. Actually, your student handbook says you're supposed to check it every day, both of them. But realistically speaking, I know that you don't have time to check your email. There's a bug in my face every day. I'm hoping nothing occurs in this video that would make it go viral. It should be just kind of run-of-the-mill class stuff. All right, final examination date and time. Let's see, for this class, we will take part 1 of the final, which is the multiple choice section, on April 30th. For the rest of it, it will be on Tuesday, May 6th, I believe. I will refresh you on that. Since this is an online class halfway anyway, we will probably do at least one portion of the final online, just to save everybody some time. All right, questions so far? All right, moving on to page 3. Course attendance policy. And this really applies to both the online portion and the in-class portion of the class. Because when it's your turn for it to be in class, I want you to be there. But you also, if it's not your turn to be in class, you need to do the work, not only for your grade's sake, but the stuff that you see online is going to be building toward the assignment we're working on. So class attendance and participation are regarded as an obligation as well as a privilege. Basically, what the attendance policy says before we get to my addendum here is you're not only encouraged to come to class, but you should view it as an obligation. You know, just because you can't be dropped from a class, and this goes for everybody, because of attendance, doesn't mean that you should blow off class. I often see a correlation between classroom attendance and success in the class. No in-class activities, including quizzes, may be made up due to unexcused and undocumented tardiness or absence. Every absence, regardless of being sick, doctor's appointments, weddings, if you have a, if you have a work shift, try to tell your boss that you can't work during class time. Military leave and school-sponsored activities will be excused, but it will be the student's responsibility to make up the work missed. Hopefully, if you guys have games on Tuesdays, that they'll either be at home or they'll be on the off week, so you can do the class in the hybrid portion. Now, for excuses, I take doctor's notes and things like that. Any documentation, really. And if you come in late, you run the risk of being marked absent. Since this is a night class, we're going to take one break in the middle. If you leave at the break for some reason, that'll also count as half an absence. All right, questions on the attendance policy? Good. Okay, makeup policy. For school-sponsored events and other excused absences, work will need to be made up the first class back from the event. And I expect you to contact me to get the assignments for both your class you missed and the next class you will attend. Since many of these class, the daily grade stuff like reading quizzes and journals and things like that are actually going to be online. If you miss class, it's pretty easy to make that stuff up, okay? I'm always willing to work with you if there are emergency situations, severe illnesses, etc. I just require documentation, even for funerals. And I really hope that doesn't happen this term, but occasionally students who have to attend funerals for friends or family members or what have you. I think I've probably been to 3 in the last 2 years. So it's just, death is just a part of life as birth. So policy on late work. Work can be turned in up to 3 days late, but with a penalty. There's a half a letter grade per day late penalty if you turn in work late. But it's always much better to turn in work late than not at all. Okay, partial credit is way better than no credit. Because if you think about it, if you lose half a letter grade and get 80%, well then that knocks it down to 75%. That's not a terrible grade. A 0 is a terrible grade. So keep that in mind. Moving on to page 4. 4 of 13, I know. The explanations are going to get faster as we go on. Course evaluation policy, I'll let you read that on your own. Electronic devices policy. In essence, what the electronic devices policy is, you need to have your phones off or on silent while you're in the classroom, and it needs to be put away. If I see it, I consider it to be in use. Now, with English 102, you may need to use your phone to look things up. In both of these classes, we'll have computers available to us. So if you're looking stuff up, it'll be on the computer in all likelihood rather than your cell phone. Okay. I have a working clock in the classroom. I just realized by rearranging this classroom, now I can see if people are clock watching because they have to turn their head. Fringe bonus. But basically, just keep your phone away during class. We'll have a break, so there are very few emergencies that can't wait an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. So, statement on discrimination and harassment, just be polite to each other and it'll be fine. Student conduct and academic honesty. The part of this I really want to talk about is on page 5, but before we get to that, there is policies in the student handbook, which is available on the Coastal website. If you feel like you're unfairly docked points for plagiarism, there is a procedure for challenging that, if you'd like. I'll give you the documentation that you need to challenge it too. It's on there, it's available to you. I didn't read the student handbook for my college until I was a junior, and I had, it had a lot of stuff in there I wish I had known as a freshman. So not a bad document to read. Okay, so on to page 5, additional plagiarism info, electronic submissions, essay requirements, and plagiarism software. I want to be fair as much as possible. And the fairest way to look for plagiarism is to have everybody submit, in my opinion, because then I don't single anybody out. Everybody has to do it in order to submit. So for each paper, you'll be required to submit it to Canvas as a Word or PDF file. RTF will also work by the time class starts or by the time it's due in Canvas. Most of the stuff in this class will be due at 11:59 p.m. I will not grade a paper that's not been submitted correctly to Canvas. Do note that ODT.pages files, also MWD, I think, files, which comes from a Mac, don't work either. So those won't work with Turnitin.com. So if you have a Mac or a Chromebook, you're going to need to get in the practice or the habit of converting your files. If you need help with that, please let me know. Each of your papers will be run through Turnitin.com, and you can view your originality report. Now, everybody's originality report is going to show something on every paper, because if you're quoting a work of literature that's in an anthology, it's fairly popular. So it's going to pop up if you're quoting the text, which you should be on all your papers. I don't really worry about it until it gets above, say, 15%. I will, go through a lot of the plagiarism checkers, especially if it's over 15%. But, if you have something pop up, don't worry about it as long as you're doing your own work and you're trying to cite your sources and give credit where it's due. Withdrawal policy, I hope this doesn't apply to anybody, but the last day of withdrawal is actually our last day of class. However, it would be before class meets on the 30th of April. In the spring, finals week is split up with a weekend in between. There's 3 days of finals, a weekend, 2 days of finals, and then almost you're kicked out of the dorms, unceremoniously. Okay, Americans with Disabilities, if you do have a learning disability, and this goes for everyone, please email me and we'll get the process started on accommodations. FERPA, I'm going to keep your information private. Let's move on to page 6. We're getting there. Some additional things to take note of. Canvas has a good course calendar, so as soon as I put a due date on something, it's going to pop up on the calendar, so you can kind of see how your week's going to go, especially if you know you're going to be busy with outside obligations, or you're going to have a couple tests in a week. You know when you need to get ahead. Pens and typed work, any work that's turned in for the course, like if we do group work or something like that, please do it in pen. Email and text correspondence with the instructor. I allow you to text me, but only before 8 p.m. on weekdays, okay? If it's on the weekend or if it's after 8 o'clock, it needs to be something very urgent. In other words, something that can't be dealt with a Canvas message. So please be courteous there. Also, when you're emailing me or texting me, please use full sentences, grammar and punctuation, all that sort of stuff. I can read most text abbreviations, but you never want me to have to try and figure out what you're saying when you're asking me a question. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay, virtual office hours. I will have 6 hours per week of virtual office hours. Those will be on my office hours once they're posted. This is when I'll be working at home, and you can text me or email me or even call on my cell phone. Let's see, I don't accept computer problems for work being late, so make sure you're getting your stuff started early. Go with the 24-hour rule if you can. I know we're all busy and it's hard to, get stuff done 24 hours ahead of time, but if at all possible, you should be shooting for 24 hours. Taking notes in class. You're responsible for all lecture material, even if you're watching the lecture online, and keep everything that you have handed back to you. Now, most of your stuff's going to be on Canvas, but if we do have quizzes or tests or rough drafts that are handwritten, make sure you keep everything. Not only is it proof that you were there, but in case I enter the wrong grade in the grade book, which does happen from time to time, you have a record of it. Let's see. Paper formatting. We're going to talk about this in more detail as we get a little closer to the essay being due, but we're going to follow standard MLA formatting guidelines. Times New Roman 12-point font, double space, 1-inch margins, all that sort of stuff. All right, page 7. A couple things at the top here. 1, you can revise any of the first 4 papers, regardless of grade you receive, as long as you follow certain things. This is kind of a refresher. You need to have 90% of the word count. So if the minimum word count's 1,000 words, you have to have at least 900. Meet me in my office or have me make a video like I'm making here, going over the nuts and bolts of your paper and what you can work on. And then write 150 to 250 word author's note. Basically, this will be like a journal topic where the topic is, this is how I revise my essay. So that is pretty straightforward. All right, questions on that? Okay, approved research material policy. This is a big one since all of our papers are research papers. You can use any of the databases from the library, so EBSCO, Academic Search, Premier, and so on. You can use anything that comes from a .edu or .gov. If you're going to use something from any other domain that's a .com, .net, .biz, whatever, .org, you can use it as long as you get permission from me first. So it's not like you can't use a .com at all, but it just has to be a valid source. And most .orgs are trustworthy, but that just means organization. And as we know, there's plenty of organizations out there that, regardless of what you think of their ideas, are at least biased. So we have to be careful with using .orgs. MLA 8th edition, we'll be using the 8th edition of the handbook, and I believe, yeah, that's what's discussed in the reading, the first reading. So this book is at least up to date as far as the MLA handbook. Questions? All right, hang in there. All right, we're going to generally start most class periods with a journal. Since we're going to be computerized after today, you'll be able to type your journal in Canvas. Most of us can type faster than we can write anyway. It's a little more convenient for me because I can more easily see the word count. I don't have to count words or anything like that. Also, you should expect a reading quiz for every class. I'm not real fond of grading reading quizzes, to be honest with you. But because the reading is so important to not only the lessons, but progression in the class, I have to do them. Also, participation is worth a bigger chunk of your grade than if you had me for English 101. It's worth 5% of your overall grade rather than just a big component of your daily grade. So 5% doesn't sound like that much, but it's an awful lot if you've got 69.1% at the end of the term. So stuff to keep in mind. All right, moving on to page 8. We're getting there. Difference between reading and studying. We're going to talk about that next week when we discuss active reading. But basically, try to eliminate distractions. Do everything you can to remember what you're reading. I tried to make the quizzes so, you know, I'm not having you quote dialogue from a story, for example. Poems are difficult to remember, so I may ask you, you know, what was your favorite poem, or what was a favorite image in a poem? And by the way, when we get to poetry, and this goes for both classes, for one of our journals, everybody's going to write a poem and everybody's going to read their poem in class. I've got a notebook full of them from that exercise. I almost have a poetry chapbook of really crappy poetry. I'm more of a writer than a poet. Okay, biggest chunk of your grade is the essays. Essays 1 through 5 are worth 60% of your grade. The first fiction essay, the flash fiction essay, will be worth 100 points. This is kind of getting our feet wet, you know, after Christmas break, getting back into the groove of things with school. Second fiction essay will be a little bit more in depth. That's why it's worth more points. Poetry essay, 125. One-act drama essay, that's going to be an in-class essay. It's going to be taken on Canvas like a quiz. And then the full-length drama essay is 150 points. There'll be an essay portion of the final. I will tell you what you need to study, and how to study it, and how you come prepared for the final. So as long as you put in the work, you should do fine on that part of the final. The multiple choice test will be based on the reading quizzes and the journals, and also the readings. In this class, it's a little easier to keep them, but make sure this is a good reason why you keep everything, because that's stuff you're going to want to study for the multiple choice section of the final. Okay, any questions on all that stuff? Yeah, next Tuesday you'll have a journal because it'll be online. No, it'll be due by 11:59. So on the weeks where you don't meet in class, your deadline is a little later. Will be posted when that's my goal. This is the first time I've had this particular class make. So I've taught Bruton and Atmore hybrids before, so I'm better at it than I was the first time I did it, but I don't have the class completely built yet. So I have, if you count this phone, which is really does count, I have 2 new preps this semester. So I'll be building as we go along. Other questions? That's a good one. Okay, on page 9, just a quick note on the point system. Take every assignment seriously. Get as many points as you can. Moving on to page 10, the major dates to remember in fall. It's spring. For spring 2019, the dates are right, even if the heading isn't. The only date we're going to miss this class is for the Mardi Gras holiday on March 4th and 5th. Now, because of spring break being in March, we do have quite a few days off in the month of March. But, you know, we only have one other 3-day weekend. So for those of you who are new to the college doesn't observe President's Day. So if you have Monday classes, they will meet on President's Day. And if you're graduating, congratulations. Those ceremonies are in May. Now, what you see at the bottom of the sheet is your literary term sheet. No, excuse me, not your literary term sheet, the reading list or tentative schedule for the class. Now, one thing you will notice is you've got a couple of literary terms quizzes due before we meet again. And I'm going to go over lit terms tonight, what the quizzes are going to be like, and so on. I'll make that on another video, so this one's not too long. But use this as your guideline, especially if you have to work ahead. Okay, this isn't going to change a whole lot throughout the term. We may have to slow down or speed up a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's not going to change. Also, I have the due dates of the major assignments. So you'll see the flash fiction essays due on the 25th, fiction essay on the 18th of February, and so on. So you really use this as your guide for class, especially since we're only meeting every other week. You only get to see me 7 times for one class and 8 times for the other. Now, on the final page, and this is just basically your copy of it because there's an assignment in Canvas, the syllabus agreement. What this is basically saying you've read and you understand the syllabus. It's not signing your life away, but it also gives me a little bit more contact information in case you miss class a couple times in a row. I want to be able to reach out to you and help out if I can. So that's going to be an assignment that's already on Canvas for you to complete. All right, any final questions about the syllabus? All right, so the second half of this video, we're actually going to go over the first essay assignment, which is the flash fiction essay assignment. If you're watching in Atmore, it is on Canvas in the Modules tab. I will go through some of the nuts and bolts of Canvas on the literary terms video. So let me hand these out to you guys real quick. Okay. So, for those of you who haven't had me before, which is going to be several people in Atmore, I imagine, it's a good idea to have a pen or, excuse me, something to write with as we're going over essay assignments, because sometimes I elaborate on some stuff that I've got like a bubble in my throat. I'm sorry. I elaborate on some stuff that's going to be important to the assignment. But let's go ahead and take a look at the due dates. Introduction outlines due in Canvas on the 22nd by the start of class time. So that will be one of those assignments that we're not meeting with you guys in Bruton, but you'll need to have done. Right? I hope my dates are right here. Let's see. Drafting day in class. This is required to be able to submit the essay. This will be due in Canvas if you're not meeting with me, or we'll do it in class in a computer lab. But either way, it's going to be an in-class writing period. This is a twofold effect. It was initially done to help prevent plagiarism, but one thing that I really like about the rough draft is it forces you to get something on the page. And that's a real benefit because some people have really severe writer's block. You can't have writer's block if you have to put something on the page. It's less scary, makes the assignment less difficult. And then the final draft will be due on Friday the 25th in Canvas. All right, questions on the due dates. Okay. So here's the assignment. Flash fiction is generally defined as a short story that's less than 1,500 words. If you find a story that's a little bit more, that's fine. A little bit less is okay, but do keep in mind that a shorter story is going to give you less to write about. One thing that we should always do, whether we're reading literature or nonfiction, is to read the material with a critical eye. For this assignment, write a 750 to 1,000 word review that discusses what does and does not work for you in the story. If this seems similar to an assignment you may have done in 101 if you were in my class, this is similar to the student's choice essay, which was the last essay in that class. By the end of the essay, you should have a strong explanation of whether or not the reader should read the story based on your opinion of it. I expect you to incorporate the information you've learned in the textbook and the PowerPoints I've posted for the first 3 weeks of the course. We're going to talk about how to evaluate fiction and things of that nature next week. For this essay, you'll choose a story by one of the authors on the list provided. So it does need to be an author on the list, and I'll get to that in a minute. And a story, some of these authors are going to have much longer stories, but they also have ones that are around 1,500 words. If you want to use a story from an author that's not on the list, you must clear it with me first. For whatever story you choose, it should be around 1,500 words or less, generally less than 5 to 7 double-spaced pages. And if you need an idea, the story of an hour on 306 to 308 of the textbook is about 1,009 words, which means it's 2/3 of the length. So, roughly 3 to 4 pages max from the textbook. If you're using a flash fiction piece from the textbook, it should not be really longer than 2 full pages. 3 to 4, okay, but that's pushing it. I don't want you to go overboard in this first essay. Here's a guide to what your essay should contain. An introduction, of course, and in that introduction, you should include some basic facts about the story, include the title, author, and the story genre. You should also say something about your opinion of the story, along with your reasons for liking it or disliking it. You don't have to celebrate the story. If you picked a story and ended up hating it, You can write passionately about how you hated it. Okay, that's fine. The subject plus significance of your thesis should be your story and your opinion of it. This is a refresher for those of you who had me, but a good thesis statement contains two things: subject plus significance. Topic of the essay plus what you're going to argue about it. Okay. For this essay, it's the story and what you're going to argue about it. Okay, you are going to have a summary. So the paragraph directly following the introduction is going to be a summary of the story. I've read most of the stories that you would talk about for this essay, but I haven't read all of them. So I do want you to briefly summarize the story. But note, there is a limit. It can be no more than 5 to 7 sentences. At 7 sentences, I'm going to cross out the rest of the words in the paragraph. Discuss the setting, the main characters, and the main events or problems that the characters experience. Personal reflection. Discuss what you like or dislike about the story. Give reasons to support your opinion. And when I say give reasons to support your opinion, this is using things like quotes from the text, research, that sort of stuff. And detail which will be building on the skills you learned in English 101. You may want to compare and contrast the story with other stories you've read by the same author or in the same genre. You know, some of these stories that you could read could be considered a farce or a satire. How does this compare to, you know, your favorite satire? Maybe you're a big fan of a show like Family Guy or The Simpsons, which are social satires in a lot of ways. You know, how would it, you know, if you run into a character that reminds you of Homer Simpson or Peter Griffin, you know, I hope not. But all in all, your focus is on your personal reflection. What do you think of it? Then your critical analysis, which is the second to last paragraph of the essay, or the second to last section, answers some of the questions that you can explore below. This is not a checklist, these bullet points, okay? These are idea generators. This is not a checklist. You can come up with your own analysis if you like. In addition, there's not enough space in the paper to answer all these questions. You should use them to help with brainstorming. So, what is the author's purpose for writing the story? Is the author successful in achieving this purpose? Maybe the setting is really important. How are the characters developed? Do they think, feel, and speak and act in a believable way? If they don't act in a believable way, is it to a purpose? Okay. How is the plot constructed? Is the action suspenseful enough? Are the events too predictable? What is the theme or central idea of the story? Does the story have a coda or lesson? Coda is one of those fancy words that English majors use. It really just means a lesson or something you should take away from the story. Does the story have a twist or unexpected ending? Does the author use any literary devices, which we'll talk about in the next video, such as metaphor, simile, alliteration? What is the protagonist doing? What is the antagonist doing? And so forth. And in the conclusion, you should evaluate the story and either recommend it or not recommend it to others. So in your conclusion, you do need to make sure that you're making a recommendation on the story. Depending on whether or not you think it's worthwhile reading, before you begin writing the review, make sure you read the story closely and take good notes. Now, in grading this paper, I'll be looking for depth of ideas and analysis, use of supporting evidence, and overall strength and clarity of the writing itself. But do note that this is not a plot summary of the story. You have 5 to 7 sentences to summarize the plot. The rest of it should be analysis. In addition to your own analysis of the work or works, you need to use at least one secondary source that you incorporate into your argument. The primary source does not count in that number. So what that means is your works cited is going to have 2 entries. Okay? First entry is the primary source, the story that you use. Second one is your secondary source. And if you want to get something on the author, if you can't find something on the story, that's fine. All right, page 2. Let's get to some of the works. One thing to remember, your works cited page does not count toward your word count. Okay? And you do need to follow that approved sources material policy that I mentioned in the syllabus. Okay, so a checklist for your formatting. You need to have a good title, a thesis that answers the so what question, fully explains your opinion and analysis of the story, logically organized, free of grammatical errors, is at least 750 words. So if you want to revise it, it needs to be at least 675. Language appropriate to an academic essay. This means you eliminate the second person. All the essays in this class should be written in the third person. So there should be no I think, I feel, I believe, or any of that, okay? Third person. Your name's on the paper, we know it's your opinion, okay? Double space and Times New Roman 12-point font, MLA guidelines for paper format. Okay, so you may pick a story around or under 1,500 words from one of the following authors. Sherman Alexie is an Native American writer from the Pacific Northwest. Cutting sarcasm, very witty, very upfront. The Bartholomew brothers, Don, Frederick, or Stephen. Frederick and Stephen were on my dissertation committee. Don died before I went to USM, but they're all very good, gifted short story writers. Ann Beatty, she's one of our better living American writers. Ron Carlson taught at Arizona State for a long time, but is also a very good short story writer. Kate Chopin, she has one of her works in the book. Robert Coover, Dave Eggers. We're actually going to read an Eggers short for the diagnostic essay. I don't know if you've seen it, but he did write the screenplay for Where the Wild Things Are, for the movie version of it. He was very good friends with Maurice Sendak, who passed away a few years ago, but Eggers wrote the screenplay for that. Ernest Hemingway, Nobel Prize winner. Amy Hemphill, another good modern American writer. Tim O'Brien writes a lot of war stories about the Vietnam War. Grace Paley, Edgar Allan Poe, often popular. Most of his stories are shorter than 1,500 words, so they're close enough to use for this essay. You wouldn't want to use something, you would not want to use something like The Fall of the House of Usher, it's too long, but The Black Cat, Mask of the Red Death, The Telltale Heart, these are all stories that are good for Poe. And on PBS's website, you could use this for the paper. There's a very good Poe documentary that should still be there. Or Curtis Sittenfeld. Also, there is a link here, and you can access it through the online copy of this sheet. But there's an article in the Huffington Post that has 7 or 8 really short stories that are all worthwhile for this paper. And if you need help finding citation, or if you need citation help, there's a link to the online writing lab at Purdue. Okay. Actually, we're going to double the point values on this because it's worth 100 points, but you get the general gist on the rubric. I'm not going to read this because my voice is starting to go for some reason. But do pay attention to this in your writing process because this is how you're going to be evaluated on the paper. So make sure that you're checking all the boxes off as you're writing here. Any questions about the assignments? Okay, so this is going to be the end of the first video.